Hey Algebros, just recording our second lesson, part 2 for you. So to get ready for the quiz tomorrow, don't forget with summation notation, I want to remember that this symbol is actually the Greek letter for the capital letter sigma, which means the sum of a sequence defined by a rule. Yes, hint, hint, you might be asked that. Okay, let's get to it. So we know that this symbol actually has 3 parts of it: the rule for the sequence, the starting point, and the ending point, or the first step and the last step. Yesterday we were given the rule and we had to evaluate, but today we are given a set of a sequenced pair of numbers, or a series. And on here, this series is 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, and we have to figure out the rule. So just like when we would do it for linear equations, I would check to see if the first difference has a pattern. And in this situation, it does. We are adding 3 every time. So that means for the step number 1, 1 times 3 would be 3. Step number 2 would be 2 times 3 is 6. And step number 3 would be 3 times 3, which is 9, and so forth. And I know this because adding consecutively is the same thing as multiplying. Okay, so then my rule will be 3 times k. K representing the step that I'm on, because every time I'm at a different step, I have to multiply it by 3. And the first step is 3. Let's see what it looks like when we write this in our summation notation for the first 5 steps. I'd have my summation notation, my capital sigma, and then I would put my rule, my starting point, which is 1, and my ending point, which is 5. And yesterday, when we solve that, we would have to expand it out to solve it. But today we're looking at, is there a way that we could reduce all that repetitive numbering, right? For example, if I have a constant series, like yesterday's homework said that the rule was 8. And that meant that at any step, the value was 8. If it was step number 5, it was 8. If it was step number 25, it was 8. So I believe on that one we had to add 8, or I think it was 6. We had to add 6 20 times. In today's, on this constant rule, if the constant is isolated by itself, let's say if I say that it is 8, and I want to do from steps 5 through 10, I can use this formula instead. Instead, last night I would have done 8 plus 8 plus 8 plus 8 plus 8 plus 8, which is 48. And this is called the expanded form. But if I know how many steps, so I know I'm having to do step 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10, so that would be 6 terms total, or 6 steps, then I could use my formula by saying that C equals NC, or my constant my constant 8 would be equal to how many terms I'm multiplying? 6 times 8, which is 48. If I have a linear function like I just solved for before on the 3k, which we'll talk about in a minute, and if I isolate the k, I can use the linear series. So for example, if I want the linear series of k, and starting with the first step is 1, and the ending step is the 5th step, and this I'm just going up 1 each time because it's linear. So that means that the total 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4 plus 5 would be 15. And this is the expanded form that we did for homework last night. But in this area, I can replace the n value, and because this is n, it's 1 through 5, I know that's 5 steps because it's 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So that means I can plug that in for all of the n values. So I get n times n plus 1 divided by 2. And that plus 1 and divided by 2 never changes, giving me 5 times 6 divided by 2, which is 15. Remember that number. We're going to see it again. On a quadratic, that means that I'm squaring the k value. So, for example, this one is through the 7th term. That would be 1 squared plus 2 squared plus 3 squared plus 4 squared plus 5 squared plus 6 squared plus 7 squared, and then I'd have to square everything and add it up. But with this formula, I can shorten it by plugging in the n value. Now I'm doing 1 through 7, so I know n is 7. And I can go ahead and plug 7 in, so I go 7 times 7 plus 1 times 2 times 7 plus 1, and divide by 6. Giving me 140 after I'm done with the math. This is a big shortcut. So let's go back to this other example that we had already solved for. When we looked at the terms and we found the rule is 3k, and we're finding for the first 5 steps. Last night, I would have gone 3k plus 3k plus 3k plus 3k, and then I would replace all the k's with all the steps I had to do, 1 through 5. Then I would do the math, and then I'd end up adding it up to get 45. Remember that number is 45 because we know the value of this is 45. So when we do the shortcut, we can see that we do indeed get to that same answer. So if I choose to use my shortcuts, I first look at the value of k. So I know that it's a linear function. So I'm going to be using this middle one because I can see this k value right there. But before I do that, I have to notice that that k is always isolated. So I have to first isolate my k. So I need to move this 3 to the front. It's multiplied by k, and I'm going to go ahead and move that, and I'll multiply it later. So once I get that out of the way, I can go ahead and use my linear function, and I'll get 5, because there's 5 steps, plus 1 times 5 divided by 2 gives me 15. And then I want to go ahead and move that 3 into play so that I can multiply that 15 by 3 now. When I do that, I get 45. And we already know, because we solved this back on this slide, we already knew that it was 45. So we know that the shortcut is safe and trustworthy, and we can use it. Now you get to try a U-try. So go ahead and pause the video here and try this U-try. You should notice that the first one will be a constant. The second one will be linear, that's right. And the third one will be quadratic. Let's see how you did. Here's my constant, means I just get to multiply by 60 times 4, which is 240. My second one, I get to use my linear. I have 15 steps, so I replace that, and I end up with 120. On example C, I have a quadratic, and I go ahead and replace it with the steps for 10, and I get 385. All right, hopefully you do a great job on the homework. And remember that it's odd only, but if you do the even, you can have some extra credit. So if you have a missing assignment, this really helps out. Or you could just get over 100% in the homework category and help you out in your other categories. All of the homeworks I strongly suggest you review for this week for the quiz that will be during block day. I also posted a practice quiz and the solutions to it so you can work those problems out. Don't forget to check all the videos to help you. All right, have a great night, and I'll see you tomorrow.